Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I did want to ask this member a specific question about anti-Indigenous violence and reconciliation. One of the sad continuing examples of anti-Indigenous violence that we've seen in this country has been a series of attacks on churches and Indigenous communities. Many churches and Indigenous communities, sacred spaces for Indigenous Christians steeped in personal and familial traditions and sometimes containing important community records, have been vandalized or burned down. These acts of arson aren't just damaging to property, they're also very dangerous to human life. And I've noticed that we haven't heard anything from the NDP on these incidents. So I want to ask this member, will she join me in condemning these attacks on churches we've seen in Indigenous communities?
The honourable member from Winnipeg Centre.
So I'm kind of concerned with this question because there seems to be a presumption of who's done it. Yep. So I'm not sure who's burning the churches and why he's relating it to this speech. Is he insinuating that it's Indigenous people? Does he have proof of that? Because if he doesn't, I would say that would be a stereotype. I would also call that racist. And so I would ask him first if he had proof, and then I would be willing to discuss it, because without knowing what the answer is, it's really hard for me to answer for him what the root of that issue is.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just in follow-up to my previous question, I thought my question was fairly clear. I characterized these attacks on churches as a form of anti-Indigenous violence. That is, somebody it has in many cases burned down churches on Indigenous communities, and I see this as an attack on those communities. I thought that was clear in my initial question, but I'll repeat the point. I'm in no way making any assumptions or suggestions about who is doing this. I'm concerned about how these attacks on churches, they undermine the religious freedom, but also they're an aspect of destruction of the cultural property of these Indigenous communities. And we have not heard from the NDP statements condemning these attacks on churches. Again, in the spirit of condemning anti-Indigenous violence, I wonder if the member would be willing to join us in condemning these various attacks on churches and Indigenous communities that we've seen.
The honourable member from Winnipeg Centre.
Well, again, I give him the same response. I don't know what the motive was. Who burned down the churches? And secondly, because I don't know that, I can't call it anti-Indigenous violence. I don't know if I haven't heard him debate anti-Indigenous violence when he talks about residential school denialism. I know what the motivation is for that. I know where it's coming from. They're very public about it. I don't have the facts, so I can't assume the motive. That's a basic premise in law. I think as legislators, we can understand that basic premise in law, that I can't read into an action where I have no facts. And I don't know what the motive is. Maybe he should do some research. Maybe he would understand potential motives. Or he could talk to officials.